Bouncers of Reddit. Have you ever crossed paths with someone you've had to throw out of a club or bar? How was the experience? I was a bouncer years and years ago. I had to throw out a friend of mine. He didn't pick fights or anything, but was becoming abusive to the staff. When he sobered up, he felt really bad about it and came back to apologize. I did some work bouncing in the early 90s and had to throw a couple of guys out for getting hammered and harassing the bar girls. Well, after work I was walking to my car and heard footsteps behind me. I turned around and it was those two guys from earlier. I figured it was going to be a fight, but they wanted to thank me. Turns out one of them had a sister who had been assaulted some years before. They said once they sobered up and realized they were acting inappropriately with the girls on staff, they felt bad. Good guy for acknowledging his mistake. I was interviewed by a guy we had tossed out. I still remember his name because he was such a douchebag that we banned him after this interaction, and we all kind of laughed at his name because it fit his behavior so well. Think Kyle Blake, not his real name, but he has two kind of bro names as first and last. Anyway, fast forward about a year, having finished school, and I'm at a staffing agency to interview for some crappy job. In walks Mr. Blake. Unfortunately, nothing super interesting happened, but throughout the interview he acted a little strange. I never found out if he recognized me, but I was not offered the job. So you threw out Jake Paul? Bold of you to think Jake Paul actually has a job to interview for. What do I like to do in my free time? I usually spend it down at the bar throwing douche bros out on their face. Sir, you did not get the job. I remember that interview. Thanks for not mentioning my real name. You're welcome, Thad Chad. Chuck Todd seems to be doing well these days, so maybe your intervention helped. It was Chad Chaddinson, wasn't it? Many years ago, one of my relatives got traumatized in college by a horrific incident involving a bouncer and a patron. She was on a first date at a local sports bar, and an off-duty bouncer, from a different bar or club, that knew her date happened to walk in. He came over and said hi and joined them at the table. A bit later, a guy the bouncer had ejected before walked up and shot him in the back of the head. My relative said it was an out-of-nowhere deafening boom and randomly the bouncer's head going flying forward to the table. A few seconds of shock and then people screaming and some running as it sets in. She was in nursing school at the time and mustered what little sense she could and yelled for someone to give her a shirt so she could put it on the back of his head while someone called 911. She told me he lived. Disabled for life but lived. She never went on a date with that first guy again. She knows it wasn't his fault, she just couldn't bring herself to do it. Edit. Thank you for the awards. It has been long enough that she seems to have moved as on much as she can. L. I just can't fathom the logic, even drunk bro logic, of killing someone over being kicked out of a bar. That's so horrible. I'm glad he survived, at least somewhat. They're kicking me out for being a disturbance and a bad person? I'm a good person, I'll kill anyone who says otherwise. Damn. Yeah, I wouldn't go back for a second date either. Their face would remind me of that event every time. Yeah. Massive shared trauma on the first date is probably not a great foundation for a relationship. So John, where'd you take her for the first date? You know that sports bar where some guy got shot in the head? Funnily enough, super mildly traumatic experiences on a first date can actually form a really strong bond with your partner as long as it's something both people had to deal with. Obviously, an attempted homicide is way too extreme. I'm talking about something like a minor car wreck or exceptionally thrilling roller coaster. What about a bomb on the bus? Your speed reference just whooshed a lot of people. Sweet Jesus. That sounds absolutely horrifying. Your relative probably saved his life. I bounced off and on for about 15 years in the same mid-sized city, about 150,000 people. One night as people were leaving, this guy sucker punched another patron right inside the door. Several other people quickly got involved. I grabbed Mr. Sucker Punch and he spins around and squares up with me. I guess because I'm tall, 6 feet 6 inches, people always seem to try and rush me and wrestle me by the waist. Mr. SP was no different. We end up wrestling for a second before I finally get a solid grip on him. He's still trying to fight at this point. I ended up picking him up and throwing him through the exit doors, breaking one of them off the hinges. About a week later, I'm out to eat with my mom of all people, and in walks Mr. Sucker Punch and sits down 2 tables over. I wasn't particularly worried about it, but I really didn't want to have to beat someone up in front of my mom. About 5 minutes later, I see him talking to the waitress and she makes her way over to our table. "That guy over there said you threw him through a door the other night at the bar. He wanted me to tell you he's sorry for being a dumb drunk." Well, at least he wasn't too salty about it. It's often the hardest thing to accept that you were wrong. I think that makes sense. I doubt anyone wants to be in that position where they're violent and drunk and need the bouncer to throw them out. Everyone's out there to have fun, and then the bouncer isn't the fun police, he's there to keep them safer. It would be cool if there were clubs with legit fun police. Quentin. My man, you are partying hard. This is very fun. Keep at it, champ. Oh, Marcus, bad move. Creeping, and you are clearly a little too tipsy. How about we give you some high-quality MDMA and you can spend some time rubbing yourself down in one of the toilet stalls? Let's keep it fun. Ex-chicken shop worker here. What's that you say? Chicken shop worker? We asked for bouncers. Well, working in a chicken shop in a crafty neighborhood full of lads and iced-out bogans means I practically was a bouncer. One night 2 dudes come in clearly drunk or drugged out. They start discussing what they want. Eventually their conversation grows wild with energy and pure hatred as man number 1 argues with man number 2 over whether they should get a bunch of chicken nuggets or 2 whole chickens off the rack. This argument turns into a full-on brawl as man number 2 presses man number 1's face against the Bain Marie, knocking our dear friend Henry the Rooster, a little statue we kept on top of the Bain Marie, onto the floor where he shattered into pieces before my very eyes. Fearing for my co-worker's safety, I grab man number 2 and shove him outside, where man number 1 eagerly follows, pouncing on his friend, taking the opportunity he apparently thinks I've opened for him. Locked the store doors, called the police, and watched as man number 2 yet again gets the upper hand on man number 1 and begins kicking the crap out of him. Funnily enough, 2 weeks later I come across man number 1 and man number 2 in the line at McDonald's. I didn't think they recognized me until I sat down to eat my food and overheard one of them say, "Yo, isn't that the chicken vagina?" After hearing that, I promptly left with both direction and magnitude. R.I.P. Henry, you will be missed. This is the most Australian fast food story I think I've ever read. Yeah, you can just feel the Southern Cross beaming upon you as you read it. You can almost see the F off, we're full car bumper stickers. Yo, isn't you the cock smashers? I kept trying to figure out WTF chicken shop was a euphemism for, until I finally realized you meant literally. Holy crap, the chicken vagina has me cracking up. R.I.P. Henry. It happened fairly frequently with the regulars. As long as they weren't fighting, they'd be allowed back in the next night. Usually they were pretty embarrassed and apologized for being a drunken jackass. One time I did have to kick out a good friend because he got in a fight. He was in a bad place and was pretty embarrassed by the whole thing. We didn't really talk about it much afterwards. That was over a decade ago, and we're still friends today, and he settled down and doesn't drink like he used to. My buddy owned a bar. They had a way of dealing with regulars who got out of hand on occasion. They used to say they would 68 people instead of 86. It didn't mean you were banned, it just meant you couldn't come back for a while. Like a suspension for a month or 2 depending on the infraction. Just to let the other people cool down and decide they weren't pissed off at you anymore. I might have to borrow that one. It's a pretty good idea, right? Not forever, just long enough to let other people get tired of talking crap about you and for you to learn from your transgression. Glad your friend is okay. Maybe it was the wake-up call he needed. Haven't been a bouncer in about 15 years, but funny story from when I was. A guy I threw out and had to manhandle roughly. He was trying to hit me and other people, came back the next day, not to start trouble or get in again but merely to apologize and go. Seeing somebody genuinely sorry was a very rare experience. He said, and I quote, "I know I was a bit of a vagina and needed a slap. I know I'm banned. I was off my nut and just wanted to say sorry and no hard feelings." It stuck with me because he really meant it. It really doesn't go like that most of the time. Edit. I never really saw people from the clubs I worked at in my day-to-day life because the clubs I worked were way far from where I live. On purpose. So few people take responsibility and apologize for their crafty behavior. When it does happen, it's refreshing. I have a good, bad story from that perspective. Went through a bad breakup. One night I was off my nut and got it into my head that my ex was in the flat next door with her mates hacking my phone and PC to send me messages and screw with my head. So I took a claw hammer and tried to smash my way in through the front door. Then I heard what was obviously an old lady's voice say hello. I instantly realized what I had done. The police came round and asked if I knew what had happened. I just told them it was me. So I appear in court for trying to smash my way into an old lady's home with a claw hammer. I fully expected jail time. The judge opens up by saying I should really have a solicitor there to represent me and strongly advised me to do so because of the seriousness of the situation. I replied, no thank you. I don't need a solicitor to argue my innocence or try to get me a lighter punishment. I trust you to give me and I accept whatever punishment you deem necessary. I got a big lecture and a 200-pound fine. Wow, that was generous of the judge. I'm glad you're better. Yeah, that was years ago and a short stint of substance abuse. Funnily enough, at some point I presented the police with enough evidence for them to charge her with a bunch of offenses including harassment and misuse of telecommunications, so the paranoia and reaction wasn't completely misplaced. Wait, what? We need to hear the rest of this story. There's really not much more to it. I ended up dropping the charges. The nature of them relied on my testimony to be prosecuted, so the CPS could not have gone ahead without my assistance. She is a lifelong addict, which stems from being sexually abused when she was very young and then mentally abused by her first husband. I couldn't hold it against her for being as screwed up as she is and preferred we just move on our separate ways. You know, you might have made a few mistakes yourself, but genuinely, I can only wish I could develop the level of empathy for the struggles others go through that you have. It's highly admirable. This one time I got really drunk while visiting Melbourne and weaved a path of destruction down Chapel Street. Problem is I was staying on Chapel Street. I walked up and down just apologizing to the places I remember going. I walk by a club and the bouncers just start laughing and saying, "You again, mate?" I apologize and say I don't remember what happened. They say it's alright, they just couldn't let me in because I was trashed, and then I took my shirt off like I was going to fight them, then laughed and said they were right and gave them a hug and put my shirt on and went to the back of the line to try and get in. Did a couple more times like that, then went on my way. They said it was pretty funny and asked me to come in for a drink. They said no one ever come back to apologize. Then one of them glassed me. Wait, what? It's when you hit someone with a pint glass apparently. Oh no, I'm aware. I want to know why he got glassed by a bouncer. He kind of threw that tidbit on the end there like it was no big deal, laughing out loud at it. I want to know why you got glassed. Guess they didn't like me acting a fool from the night before. Wow, crazy. You sure you didn't say anything? Seems a bit over the top to say come on in and then glass someone. Glassing someone is basically an automatic prison sentence where I come from. The idea of a bouncer glassing someone under any circumstances short of trying to stop a terrorist attack is unthinkable to me. Man, most of the people who come back sobbing and apologizing, which happens a lot, are doing so because they're asking to be unbanned. I'd happily unban a guy if he didn't even ask to be unbanned, as long as he wasn't banned for something dangerous. Yeah, he didn't even try asking. Just said he knows he's banned and sorry. Shook hands and walked away. Sounds like a good guy who had a bad night. Yay, some people just can't handle alcohol either. Sucks, but lessons are learned the hard way. I had a pretty dumb phase in my early 20s when I got blackout drunk like 3 days a weekend. I got kicked out of a bar on Friday night, came back Saturday and apologized and stayed there a while with the same friends. Got kicked out a second time. I have a slightly relevant story. My brother went to university in kind of a rough city. He was at a student bar and watched this guy get bounced. Well, he and the bouncer crossed paths again that night. The guy came back with a chainsaw. Needless to say, he ruined the fun for everyone else and cops were involved. Bouncer was not injured. Edit: Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, for those asking. Did not expect this to blow up like this, but one of the commenters/user Tripe Doctor was there. What a twist. Reddit link. He chain, he saw, he bounced. Sadly his bar burned down later. The band just played fiddle. I was effing there that night. Details please. Pretty much how he said. Dummy came back within the hour with a chainsaw thinking that it would scare the staff, but really it just pissed off everyone at the bar, so he got manhandled by the police and dragged out. I'm probably missing so many details because I destroyed my liver that night. Fun coincidence, since then I've started working security and worked the occasional bouncing contract. It's not every night that a drunk man shows up with a chainsaw at your local watering hole. Thank you for watching. If you like our videos, please like them on YouTube. And share them with your friends. Please subscribe to be the first to know about Red Rabbit Reader's new videos. We welcome your comments below. Another of our videos will begin shortly.